So now, just to highlight you again, comparing quantities, syllabus. So there are so many topics in this. Let's not go deeper into each one of them. So we will slowly take one by one. So for today, I am only taking ratios. Ratio. What is this ratio? How it will help me? Why do I have this ratio as a part of comparing quantities? First of all, how should I represent this? So you need to know how should you represent this. So this is what, how do you represent this? So ratios can be represented in three formats. So the first format is, for example, you want to represent the ratio of boys versus girls in your school or in your class. Let's take in your class you have boys 20, then girls as 30. So how do you represent this in a fraction? So if I want to represent the ratio of boys versus girls, then how do I do? I can represent with 20 by 30, which is equivalent to, so 0 0 cancels, then I would have 2 by 3. So this is one way of representing. Or else I can also represent with semicolon. Same boys versus girls, I can represent like 20 is to 30. Then the same calculation, you can cancel 0 0, then it becomes 2 is to 3. Same, you can also represent boys versus girls as, so there are, for every 20 boys in class, there were 30 girls located in that class. So you have 20 boys in class to 30 boys. So you can represent like this, or in a word like, in a class there were 20 boys and 30 girls. So you can represent in any format, but the usual representations are like this, and you will get questions in this format like, okay, there was some question something like which was in words, then how do you convert into this, and then this or this, then how do you solve your question? Yes, since you have gone through this all, what is ratio and how do you express it, now let's go next level, like what are these types, how many types are there in the ratios. So majorly I would say two types are there, one is simple ratio and the other one is compound ratio. This inverse ratio is nothing but reversing what you have in a simple ratio. So that's why let's concentrate more in this simple ratio and compound ratio. So as we have taken the previous example again, simple ratio is nothing but comparing two quantities directly. So in a class you have 10 boys and then you have 5 girls. How do you compare them? So you divide 10 by 5, then you'll get 2 by 1. So in a class the ratio of boys versus girls is 2 is to 1. So this is simple ratio. Again, if you do the same thing in a reverse way, so here if I find a girls versus boys ratio, so let's say I found boys versus girls ratio as 2 by 1. If I want to find in the same class girls versus boys ratio, I don't need to do all these calculations again. I can simply reverse them. That is nothing but girls versus boys ratio is nothing but 1 by 2. So that's what we represented, like if the ratio of A is to B is, the inverse ratio of A is to B is B is to A. Here let's assume this is your A, this is your B, then the inverse ratio would be B is to B A. So that's why you can easily form it. So I also gave another example so that it is easy for you, like cats to dogs. If you have 3 cats and two dogs in a home, then in the same home if you want to calculate dogs to cats. So this is the third form which we discussed earlier, like how do you represent in words. cats to dogs. Similarly, dogs to cats. Then the inverse of this would become 2 is to 3. And now we go into the compound ratio. So in your classes or somewhere, they will give like compound ratio is nothing but ratio of two or more ratios. So then you will be multiplying. Let's take one ratio is a by b, and then another ratio you have is c by a, c by d. Then they will say there is a formula like a by b multiplied by c by d. This is nothing but your compound ratio. So AC by BD. So this is correct, but I want you to understand the logic instead of remembering the formulas or something. So that's why I came again with boys to girls ratio and girls to teachers ratio. So here I would like to explain more in deeper. Let's take, you have in a class 10 boys to girls ratio as 2 is to 1, and then girls to teachers ratio as 3 is to 1. So how do you segregate this? For example, if I take G as a common point, so in both these, G is your common point. So this is your common point. And then now if I have to represent boys in terms of girls, then it would become 2 girls. Then, and similarly if I want to represent teachers, so it mentioned like for each teacher there were 3 students. Here for each girl there was 2 boys. So that means there will be if I want to represent B in in girl format, then it will be 2G. And then for each teacher there were 3 girls. So then this would become G by 3. And now if I want to get the ratio of this B is to T, then 2G multiplied by divide by G by 3. So that will become, then 3 will come to upside, then it will become 6G by G. If you cancel this G, then it will become 6 by 1. So this way also you can reduce. Only if you know the concepts, if you understood the concept really well, you can reduce this way. Otherwise, you also have option like it is a multiplication of 2 ratios, then you will get it easily. So this way, how do I say is, so girls to boys ratio, boys to girls ratio is 2 by 1, then girls to teachers ratio is 3 by 1, then the compound ratio you will get is 2 multiplied by 3 by 1 multiplied by 1, which is nothing but 6 by 1. You can also get this way. This is with respect to formula, but you need to understand how we derived this. So this, if you understand this logic, then you can easily do it anything. You don't need to remember any formulas. Okay, and the next thing is, how do you compare ratios? So till now we understood what is ratio, and then we understood how do we represent them, and then we understood how do we what kind of types we have. So like representation, we done it like this, or 2 by 3 or 2 to 3. And then we also calculated simple ratios versus compound ratios like 2 by 3 multiplied by 3 by 3, 3 by 2. So then we'll get compound ratios like 6 by 6, which is nothing but equal. So like this you can make the compound ratios, and inverse ratios also, like 2 by 3 inverse ratio is nothing but 3 by 2. Now what we want to understand is like to check which ratio is greater or which ratio is less. For example, if you want to compare two numbers, then what do you do? 3, 2. You know which is greater and which is smaller by saying this. Like you can say simply 3 is greater than 2, or you can say sorry 2 3, you can say 2 is less than 3. So you can say 2 is less than 3, or if you have equals, you can say 2 is equals to 2. So you know these symbols. How do you apply the same comparison to uh, ratios? So that's what we are going to do. And how it will be useful for you also we can discuss. For example, you have a percentage like 1 by 2 and 1 by 3. Now you want to decide which is greater. So, but if you see differently, 1 is equals to 1, 2 is greater than 3. And if you simply say, okay, so 2 is less than 3, sorry. If you simply say, okay, 2, I can see 2 left side and 3 right side, so I can simply say this way. Then you will be failing, because when it is in numerator and denominator, the place of value will also make importance. So that's the reason, not to have more confusions like this, we have to first get the fractions of that, then compare the fractions so that you will get the better value. Let's take the same example like 1 by 2 and 1 by 3. So for simplicity, let's take we want to do it in a decimal points. So let's multiply 1 by 2 with 100. So then you will get 100 by 2, which is nothing but 2 5s are 10 and 50. So you got this 50. And then on the other side, like we have 1 by 3. Let's multiply that as well with 100. So this, since I am multiplying both sides with 100, so I am not changing the actual value of that. I am making calculation more easy for that. So similarly, if you do this, so then it will become 100 by 3. Then you will get 3 3s are 9, then 3 3s are 9, then 0.333, all those things. So then you will get 333 like that. So then you can easily decide from this, oh, then my 1 by 2 is greater than 1 by 3. This is how you compare it. Otherwise, if you simply compare with, okay, 2 is smaller than 3, 1 is equal, then you'll make a mistake like 2 is less than 3 and even 1 by 2 is less than 1 by 3. So that's the reason converting into decimal format is always important. So I follow this way. You can also follow different approaches, like if you want to do this division, you can follow something like this, where you'll keep 100 and then you'll keep 0. So then it looks like 0, then 0 point, then 2 5s are 10, then it will become 0, and then the answer will be 0.5. So for 1 by 2, 0.5. And similarly, if you do same with this, first you will keep 0, so then point, then 3 3s are 9, you'll get 1, and then again, since point is there, you don't need to have, so then again 3 3s are 9, then you'll get 1, like that it keeps on going. So even if this case also 0.5 is greater than 0.33. So just not to have in this much level, I given in this example 50 33. So this is easy to compare. So this way you can easily compare ratios. And next session we will discuss about proportions, fractions, all those things. Thank you so much for this